Probably also going to the point.
Yeah,
Working and like
Yeah.
nowadays.
I'm from Auckland.
Wow. I did not understand one
There we go. I think you could really get further away.
Yeah. So only maybe die Tongrade irgendwie ausmachen von unserem Input.
So now you're not live. Yes, yes, I can hear you. So
Still Cihan, but otherwise other panelists also here. So let me start with thank you for all. I will be sharing Atakan Büke. I'm affiliated with the Research Center Global Dynamics and a Philip Schwarz Initiative Fellow here at Leipzig University. My background is in sociology, so I'm a kind of postdoc researcher here right now. I will explain what does this mean in a moment. So I would like to share some background information about how we ended up all here in this room. So I have checked my emails and my laptop and saw that it was in February 26 in 2021 that we met at RC40 meeting at the International Sociological Association Forum of Sociology, I guess. So we were discussing this to my knowledge, the first idea emerged out of that from Mustafa Koç, from now called Metropolitan University of Toronto, I guess. It was previously Ryerson University, but I realized that they changed their name for better, I hope. But after Mustafa's idea that organizing an RC40 kind of a meeting, and we will hear more about RC40 mini conference tradition from Stephen in a moment. Then Stephen and Hilda, the executive committee members of the RC40, took the leading role and actually started to planning this idea, making it more concrete. So they initiated the whole process and kindly invited me and Jose to be a part of this process to help the organization process. And somehow I took that courage to say that, okay, we might organize this in Leipzig, and Zara kindly accepted this idea and developed it further. And with that moment onwards, it was kind of quick and kind of easy, I would say, to organize this mini conference. And this was thanks to at least among Mustafa, Yıldız, Stephen, Hilda, Zara, Moritz, Jose, who are all organizing committee members in a sense. It was also possible thanks to at least 3 institutions. One is SFB here at Leipzig University, the recent Research Center Global Dynamics, and SFB is the Collaborative Research Center, which is titled Processes of Spatialization under the Global Conditions. So they agreed on hosting us, and they provided, fortunately, some also financial resources to us. They provided the seminar room, this nice technical setup here. And maybe I should say a few words about the SFB. It's a research center funded by the German Research Foundation. And as you can sense from the title, they examine modern history up to the present day with a specific focus on the role of new spatializations in shaping social interactions and social change. And also it's part of this research center, Global Dynamics, in short, recent Globe. So they are engaging with many different research fields and topics. And I should say thanks a lot to SFB making this possible to a great extent. And the second organization was Philip Schwarz Initiative, which also provides my own funding. So I will be able to, I'm here thanks to Philip Schwarz Initiative and thanks to Zara, who is my Philip Schwarz Initiative mentor. And Philip Schwarz, I'm telling this because Philip Schwarz Initiative is named after the Australian pathologist Philip Schwarz, who lost his professorship in Frankfurt in 1933 due to, as you can imagine, his Jewish faith. So the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation and the Federal Foreign Office took the lead to launch the program in 2015 in his name. And this program allows researchers who are subject to significant and continuous personal threats in their own country to continue so that they can continue their work at German universities and research institutions. So I was expelled from the public service and Turkish university system because of this peace petition process. Maybe you are familiar with those things. So I'm not currently allowed to work as an academician in Turkey, but thanks to Philip Schwarz Initiative, I'm now here. And they also provided a significant, they will be providing our catering tonight and also tomorrow evening. So, and the third initiative who made this possible is Academics in Solidarity. which is based in Berlin, Freie Universität Berlin. So they also seek to create a network of solidarity, strengthen transnational research cooperation, and offers support to, again, displaced and at-risk scholars. So they offer access to mentoring, academic counseling, etc. And also they provide a small grant for workshops like this. So I'm telling this because I would like to highlight that this room is made up of scholarly collaboration and solidarity, I should say. So we are breathing that academic scholarly solidarity and collaboration right now, and I'm sure that we will be developing it further to another level in the upcoming days and with this session. So please excuse my anxiety and excitement. Then I tend to lose all my language skills when I'm super excited, even in my native language. So, and finally, of course, I would like to thank you, because none of this would make sense if you weren't actually here and on Zoom right now today with us. So you made it possible. So during our mini conference, we will have 2 roundtable sessions starting today. They will be hybrid and open to anybody who has the link, and they will be also streamed via Recent Globe's YouTube channel. And we will tomorrow and Friday, we will have 9 sessions on themes like food insecurity, food security, migrant workers, supply chains, alternative agri-food movements and initiatives, state policies and responses to the pandemic, local and indigenous movements, emerging theoretical and methodological challenges and tendencies. And we will have 25 presentations, for which I'm super excited, excluding the roundtables, I mean. So, and in total, we will be hosting 45 speakers from all around the world, from various universities, from Australia, from South Africa, from USA, from Turkey, from Germany, from Norway. So I think we did a good job in terms of the thematic and thematic variety, geographical variety. So we are really curious about our upcoming discussions. So in short, you made this possible, and I'm sure this will be a kind of a school, at least for me, in terms of how the pandemic and other agri-food related problems are shaping our agri-food system relations, as well as our theories and concepts. So welcome again, and thank you so much. Stephen Wolf, who is from Cornell University and also the president of research committee on sociology of agriculture and food of the International Sociology Sociology Association, right?
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Stephen.
Correct. And thank you. And as Atakan has said, thanks all for being here. It's my pleasure to speak with you. What is lacking in presentation of these gifts should be made up for in the heartfelt way that they're presented. Recognize our local organizers, and I'll just say a few words about this in just a minute. So, again, it's a great opportunity for us to be together and to have a chance to speak to you in leading RC40 during this 5 years because of COVID. So I'm Stephen Wolf. I'm from Cornell University. I've been a member of RC40 for, 25 or more years. It is a very important part of my professional development and finding my identity as a researcher, as a PhD student. And it's a kind of honor and the pinnacle of a career as I'm nearing the end to serve in the role of president. So it's quite an emotional moment to lead this organization, as we have, I think, a very unique success. And just to try to put it in context, we have mini conferences on a regular basis. But my understanding, certainly in my professional lifetime, we've never had a mini conference outside of a major international conference. We've always piggybacked on European rural sociology, International Rural Sociology, Rural Sociological Society of USA, blah, blah, blah. So it's a very bold and special achievement to organize an event, produce an event, attract so many interesting papers from such a broad scope, generate the funding necessary to put on what I know is going to be a wonderful event. So it's really a watershed moment. It's a new level for RC40. So it's not just continuity. This is novel and very exciting. And I'm very grateful to Atakan, Jose, Moritz, and Sarah, as well as the University of Leipzig and the funders that you mentioned, Atakan. I also recognize Mustafa, Yildiz, and Ilda, members of the committee. I've brought, in the spirit of agri-food and permaculture, no trees were killed to produce this maple syrup. My wife is Finnish, my children speak Finnish, and in Finland, they make sweet syrup from birch. But maple syrup is 40-1, so a gallon of maple syrup has to boil away 40 gallons of water. I think birch is something like 60-1. So for our local organizing, Sarah, Moritz, Jose, and Atakan, I brought you some syrup. New York likes to think it's the most important syrup producer, but Vermont, in fact, holds the title. But actually, Quebec produced 80 to 90% of the world's syrup. But this is Vermont maple syrup for you, so thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I come at agri-food studies really through environment and thinking about agriculture as a tremendous land use, a tremendous producer of public bads, water quality, greenhouse gases, biodiversity loss, water quality degradation in terms of wetlands, groundwater, surface waters, and so forth. But through my PhD and postdocs and so forth, that the social dimensions have obviously become very important to me. And I mentioned this just in terms of the kind of scope and breadth of RC40 and agri-food studies. I got my PhD in Wisconsin, which was part of the original kind of Midwest school of Heffernan, Bush, Buttle, and so forth. And then I had a postdoc in California, where it was Michael Goodman and Michael Watts. And then I had part of my postdoc in France and Toulouse for 2 years. And then I lived in London and did more European things, and I married a European. And now through my graduate students, including Amrutha, I'm learning about other parts of the world, including India, China, and Mexico. And so that's not about me, it's about RC40. As Atakan said, the scope of this group is quite exciting. And also interdisciplinary, I would say as well. We have sociology in the title, but we're broader than that. Just to go further with Atakan's story of how we got here, that Mustafa came up with a very bold intellectual idea that Hilda and I got excited about, and we encouraged him to build a mini conference. And we kind of said, all right, now deliver. You've put something interesting on the table. And he immediately pivoted and found some early career scholars, which we encouraged him to do, and passed the ball to you. And you've carried it forward, which is really great. Because the mini conference is not just about intellectual exchange and debate and trying to support one another and explore our own research and others' research and understand the field as it moves. It's also an explicit project of social reproduction, as Bruce and I can wrestle as to who's the oldest in the room. But it's about bringing the next generation of scholars into the conversation in a very flat and equal way. That was part of Bill Friedland's culture, and he was always yelling at the young people to get their voice in there. Don't let the old people talk too much. Why do we come together? We come to support one another in solidarity, as Atakan emphasized. As I said, we come to explore our own research and share our research, and we come to try to build an intellectual community that can grow our scholarship and grow our impact. And that requires that people show up, that people do good work, that they publish, that they exchange, that they mentor, and all of that is a work in progress. One thing that's very special about this event is COVID, I think, dealt everyone in every organization a big blow. And there's a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of our routines and a lot of the structure we took for granted is now very fragile and very shaky. My office, I mean, I go to my office, no one's in my office. We have buildings that remain empty. And leading RC40 with Hilda, I have a lot of anxiety about what is the future of an international organization that requires lots of jet fuel, lots of security for immigration and border and visas, resources to travel, time to travel, And I'm concerned about the future of not just RC40, but the entire kind of structure of associations like ours. So it's very important that we continue to build that. And the last thing I'll say is, as I started, we're not just continuing the strong tradition of mini conferences in RC40, where it's an opportunity to bring early career people in exchange with late career people and so forth, exchange across geographies, ideologies, methodologies, problems that were listed. But it's also a departure. So we're not just reproducing the past, but this effort to create a standalone meeting, which seems to really be a success, could be a new future for us collectively. So congratulations to the organizers, and I hope the event will be sweet for all of you.
We should probably not start before 5.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so we have 5 minutes till our roundtable starts, and I guess we shouldn't start much earlier because of our online audience. And whoever maybe still needs a break, I don't know, the bathroom or to grab some water or something. Do we have coffee? I don't know. Yeah, so my name is Sarah, and already been mentioned a few times, but I'm exceptionally grateful for Atakan that has organized, mostly organized, and brought this mini conference to Leipzig. And thanks so much also to Stephen and Hilda and the RC40 committee members who supported this idea and made it possible that we can gather here together, I guess, for the next few days. And I'll be moderating this roundtable, and I'm quite excited that we don't do it in the tradition of that we open up this conference also in a little bit of a different way. So we deliberately decided to not go with the tradition of having a keynote speaker, which usually would maybe be one of those old people that we don't want to have be talking too much. And instead, we decided that we wanted to hear from people who are working on the ground and actually doing some work with people in communities and who could give us first-hand insights on what was going on for them in their organizations. And I'll just leave it with that in a few minutes. Then I think we can.
In the spirit of being brave to ask questions, I know I'm supposed to know what spatialization and territorialization is, but I don't think I do. So what is it?
What is it?
I'm not in this room.
There's a research center here that has, I don't know, almost 50 people now employed for almost 8 years trying to figure out what it is. And from what my understanding, they're still debating. But I'm happy to talk to you about it during coffee breaks or maybe over dinner.
Don't be afraid to ask questions because I really am interested, but I don't think I know.
Well, I guess in a nutshell, the key idea is that space is something that we collectively produce as people, right? So that it is something that is socially produced. It's not only a material substance, or it's something that is the universe and somehow is surrounding us. Of course, we have a material environment, I guess, and we're living in some sort of physical material world. But they are also spaces that are socially, culturally, politically, economically, and so on produced. And this is mostly the focus of these kinds of spatialization. And then the territorialization is the one that is where you put the flag on, I guess, to make it very simple. Okay, so there's a 2-minute delay. Either we are 2 minutes late on the screen, or the bell is 2 minutes earlier.
2 minutes earlier, I guess. Yeah, we have.
Okay.
You can also use this laptop to see the.
Yes, that's perfect.
Yes. So we have. Okay, so Jose and Kim are integrated, so we don't need to pin them on the screen, but Attila is from Ecuador side. It would be nice to pin him. Jehan is from Turkey, so he will be with us also as a panelist. And Serenity. So I guess I don't know which one is clicked.
Sarah? That is a mic, is it? Hello.
No, she's not using it.
Go on forever. Share it with your thousands of followers on Instagram or sleeping and all.
Oh, okay.
Were you allowed to go?
It's a quick look and have this link. So I have to send the link to SFP code. This is also a part of SFP.
I'm not good at the technique.
They contact, or they might have joined us at 5:15 because.
I have no idea. They really didn't communicate this to me.
They realize I called followers.
Can wait. Maybe I should also change this name to Sarah. Nice.
Like if I do it, next time I do a project,
something, there are.
It's very, we can't wait for
Can't wait.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Right.
That was like when I was. But it's the internet cafe. This is not sure. Oh, it's interesting. Yeah.
I know, I was thinking, what happens if something happens, that's like kind of stuck in Europe.
I think they very for 10 more minutes. Maybe I should summarize and let them and also the participants know that. Explain them what happened briefly. I mean, this is also a colloquium. Is that okay?
Yes, hi again, and I have to make this announcement. This also overlaps. I mean, also we are kind of replacing the SFP colloquium. SFP has its own colloquium on Wednesday this time, 5:15 in fact. So it seems we couldn't manage it quite well, so that they didn't get the link. We announced another Zoom link, but SFP colloquium, SFP members couldn't get this link. So they regularly start. We regularly start our colloquium at 5:15. So we need to wait till 5:15. If that's also okay for you. I'm so sorry for this. This is kind of our problem. I mean, I should say. Honestly. Sorry for that, but so that let's wait for them also. They can also join us and don't miss this very nice roundtable discussion.
in our panel members.
Yes, we can hear you. And also we apologize from Ceyhan, Attila, Serenity. Sorry for this inconvenience. I mean, and thank you for your understanding and for your patience. Then we will be starting at 5:50 in Central European time. Great.
Take the honor at all, so.
But I missed the one. You're from
But my family's from Europe. Yeah, no, that's coming out.
I've got family, but my dad has a cigarette. Are you coming to?
The other way. I think some people, there definitely was a lot of that. I guess I wanted to go to some involved in business stuff, but also organizing a session.
There's a few agri-food. There's a good list of sessions.
There is, so we have overwhelming number of I'm worried.
Everyone does it the night before.
So what's the,
Maybe I can suggest this. In your bags, Wi-Fi information. If you have any problem, is that possible? But there is Wi-Fi available here, which is has an info and you have a password. So in your bags, you can find the Wi-Fi. We have two restrooms in this floor. One is very close by, and one is in the same place. So we will be having a small reception after this round table here again. But tomorrow we will be at a restaurant. So today we will have some wine also. Sorry for the online participants. But we will be having some wine also here in this room. And also some food. Not big expectations, don't have your expectation figure, but tomorrow also we will be this conference dinner. A very close by restaurant, just next building, Andrea. It's a nice Italian restaurant. And what else I can say? So I hope you are all relaxed and well with your hotel rooms. Everybody checked in, everything is okay. So great. And if you have any other further questions, let us know.
Yeah.
I've submitted to.
All right.
I don't think so.
Different.
I don't think RC40, yeah. I think all that sort of STS.
We just wait. Is there yeah.
So I'm not actually technically a high defender.
Yeah, because we're not. There's so many opportunities. Nice things like you can't stay in one policy. Of course.
Department is like 1,000 sections. Something like I was like huge, you know, not want to be running around.
No, it's just to have to come You're very welcome to join, even though it's come and see us.
Sorry, like the road. That's an exception. Where are you from? New Zealand. Where? Open. Why? Do you know? Yeah, and as far as what's the name of that 1930s? Yeah, nature. My wife I almost did my PhD with this. But then ended up at Oakland. In the shop. But I don't think I make it. Yeah. Yeah. My supervisor was quite good to bring those people.
Yeah. It still has
Okay, so welcome everyone once again. Sorry for the delay. I hope, but maybe it was a nice opportunity to just already get to know each other a little bit and have a few chats here and there. And now we get started with our roundtable. And again, I'm very excited really that this is how we're opening up this conference. Instead of having a keynote or some sort of academic telling us how the world works, we thought we're gonna a little bit upside down and reach out to people that have been working as part of social movements and agri-food networks on the ground during the pandemic, and to try and learn from them first. What did the pandemic mean to them? How did they experience the past years? What were the difficulties and challenges that they have dealt with? And how are they looking forward into the future? And I'm very, very happy to welcome 4 panelists for this roundtable today. We have Serenity Hill from Australia joining us. Thank you so much for staying up late as well and to be able to be here with us. Then we should have Gilberta Jimenez, who I believe was here earlier, and unfortunately, I think her internet connection was a little weak. She's joining from Guatemala, but I hope she'll be able to come on board later again, or just in a few minutes. Keeping my fingers crossed. Then Attila Sox from Romania, who's joining us, and Ceyhan Temurcu from Turkey. And unfortunately, Marta Olsen had to cancel her participation today. She originally also wanted to join us from Norway, but apparently she got sick and couldn't make it today. But I think we still have a very nice round of panelists and lots of things to discuss. And I will start first with a brief introduction of our panelists, and then we go and have a first round, a few rounds of questions that we prepared, and then later on we open it up to the audience here and of course the audience online as well. Yeah, so to start with Serenity Hill from Australia. She lives in Northeast Victoria in Australia in Bangarang country, and she is a co-founder together with her partner Kirsten Larson of the Open Food Network, which is a non-for-profit organization since 2012 that wants to see a world where fair, open food and farming networks reconnect people and regenerate the earth. They support development of short supply chains that pay farmers well and ensure access for all. Open Food Network is an open source software platform provided by a network of independent nonprofit organizations in 15 countries. And it also provides education and support for farmers, food hubs, and food social enterprises. Serenity herself comes from long lines of farmers on both sides of her family. And she's currently a regenerative sheep farmer who is passionate about developing solutions that deal with a multitude of barriers to expansion and agroecological farming. The farm has a unique nonprofit structure to enable a broader community of eaters and farmers to form a long-term sense of custodianship for the land. One of the first education programs at her farm is a nature connection program for children, which is called Wild Hearts. Thanks again for joining us, Serenity, and very glad to have you with us today from Australia. And then moving on to Amish Masha, which is the organization that Gilberta Jimenez is a part of. I will still introduce it, hoping that she can join. Amish Masha is an association of indigenous Xinca women in Santa Maria, Xalapan in Guatemala. It emerged through the desire of many women to change their lives as they were tired of living with so much discrimination and patriarchal violence, and thus decided to organize themselves in 2004. They are now the only women's organization that fights for the defense of the territory, body, and land. And Amish Masha is based on the following axis of work. First, the defense of the territory, body, land, and we will hopefully learn more about that later. The construction of critical thinking for political transformation when revere and women's political participation, as well as recovery and dissemination of the Xinca identity. And Gilberta Jimenez is she's a human rights defender and also a coordinator of Amish Masha. Thanks for joining. I wanted to say, unfortunately, she's not here yet, but yeah, fingers crossed to Guatemala. And then we have also the network Ecorurales, which is represented here today, which is a national association of peasants and agroecological food producers from Romania. The association has a working political structure of a unionized organization, having a coordination committee of 5 peasant leaders and working groups on important thematic and transversal topics, such as land, seeds, markets, peasant rights, agroecology, Eastern Europe cooperation on agroecological farming, migration, and the Common Agriculture Policy of the European Union. This organization, Ecorurales, was established in 2009, by a group of small agroecological peasant farmers due to a lack of political representation of small-scale farmers and a decrease in the rights of peasant farmers due to unfair food and agriculture policies and practices. Since 2011, Ecorurales is also one of the Eastern European members of the European coordination Via Campesina, European Peasant Movement, and regional structure of the World Peasant Movement, La Via Campesina. Very warm welcome to this organization as well, which is today represented by Attila Schöks, who is a peasant farmer from Transylvania, Romania. And he runs himself a small family farm, which is also rooted in the principles of peasant agroecology, producing, amongst others, regional peasant varieties of plums. Attila is a member of the coordination committee of Ecorurales and also the former president of the association. He's also a coordination member of the European coordination of La Via Campesina and coordinates the Ecorurales Right to Land program, through which he advocates for fair land rights and access to land for Romanian peasant farmers. Thanks very much for being here, and very warm welcome to you as well, Attila, from Romania. I guess you're joining us today. And lastly, but not least, of course, we have Tadia, which is a solidarity-based collective of producers working in the Güdül district of Ankara. It started its activities on nature-friendly and community-supported food production and supply in 2012. And it currently includes 16 producer families who all apply agroecological farming practices, although without any official organic certification. The collective applies and promotes agroecological principles and methods in food production distribution on the basis of small-scale family farming and short supply chains. And today we're being joined by Dr. Ceyhan Temurcu, who is an instructor at the Cognitive Science Department at the Middle East Technical University, and also a member of Tadia, of course, this organization where he actively supports rural-urban connections in Ankara And yeah, very warm welcome to you as well. I'm very glad to have you with us, and I'm much looking forward to the discussions with you as well. And yeah, so we're going to start with 4 rounds of questions now, and then we're going to open this up to the audience. And to start with, and also to better understand a little bit about your organizations and movements that are gathered here today, I would like to ask you to please tell us a little bit more about your organization's main activity during the pandemic. For example, at what level, how, where, and with whom have you worked during the pandemic, and what kind of support have you provided to people? And I would like to first start by giving this question to Serenity in Australia.
No, so I get to start. Okay, so firstly, I'll just point out that it's 2:20 here in Australia. So if I say crazy things, it's because it's early in the morning. So I'm from the Open Food Network, and I started the Open Food Network with my partner Kirsten, as was said in the introduction, about a decade ago. And the Open Food Network is supports online trading for both farmers and also food hubs and co-ops and other organisations that help farmers cooperate to reach customers in short supply chains. So it kind of works by farmers being able to have their own shops or having cooperative shops online, and it's set up in a way that enables distribution of food through hubs. So it tries to coordinate that local food distribution through the way that the software is set up. We developed this as an open source software, and we're a non-profit organisation, so it's a common infrastructure that can be used by other organisations across the world. So it started in Australia, but I think now we're up to somewhere between 15 and 20 countries where independent organisations have set up as Open Food Network providers of the software and in their countries. So it's like a common infrastructure. So in Australia and in our other organisations, we act in a kind of subsidiary structure. We have over those years, we have turned into supporting or recognised the need to support short food supply chains and social enterprises and food hubs and farmers using our software in much broader ways. So we do quite a lot of capacity building, facilitating peer support, other food system development projects, regional food activation. So a lot of wide sort of support. It's not just about the software. Now, during the pandemic, we saw a huge leap over about a month, about 10 times users of our software in Australia. And this was repeated quite a common experience in other countries using the software as well. So all of a sudden, everyone was interested in local food, activated to local food and wanted to set up things. That was a big challenge for our organisation at the time, but wonderful. I'll just give one example of that, and it helps to explain kind of what we do in a really practical sense. So at the start of the pandemic, in a town very close to where I am, that they had a farmers market shut down. Farmers market couldn't operate anymore because of the lockdowns, and so within 2 weeks there was someone who was like, right, we need an alternative, and they were able to set up a multi-farmer store on the Open Food Network and open for business, and it set up a very simple model. They had an undercover area by a local business that just donated an undercover area, and they were able to collate food from about a dozen different farmers, and customers put it up on a Wednesday, and customers buy, and then it's packed on farmers bring it in on one morning, it's packed on that day, and customers would drive through and pick up their order on that day. So that was a response to the pandemic that was enabled very fast by use of the Open Food Network. And then we also provided a lot of support for local food enterprises to adapt to all the regulations and COVID restrictions to be able to continue operating. So that's probably enough by way of answer to that question from me.
Where I lived, at least in the beginning of the pandemic, it was a similar situation where actually the farmers markets were shut down relatively quickly, and the only markets that were still open were the supermarkets, which is kind of ironic in a certain way. So it's great to hear that. And yeah, so I'd like to continue with the same question as well. And give it on to Attila and ask you, so what were your main activities during the pandemic, and yeah, what can we learn about your organization?
Thank you very much, and I'm very glad to be here, and hello everybody. I hope you can hear me well. Funny that you mentioned the irony, because that's exactly what happened in Romania. Once the pandemic started, very quickly, the territorial markets of peasants, or all of our members, started to be shut down because of health reasons and because of the reasons of social distancing and all the arguments that are out there. But quite ironically, the supermarkets, which are the closed markets and which have the air closeness and the human body closeness, were bigger. They were opened and they remained open. And more of that, the paradoxal situation began that they said that they are essential buildings and they are essential services. Also essential services, because in the last 20 years, a lot of the IMF loans were supporting the development of the supermarkets in Eastern Europe. So definitely there was a big interest to keep them open. But nonetheless, what our first reaction as Eco Ruralis was, because we are a large network of peasant farmers, most of us selling on territorial markets that are cultural, historical, that have that bear our cultural identity and our cultural food, and not just for us as peasant farmers, but also for consumers of the different regions of Romania. So when, of course, the shock of the first wave of closing down these markets came, then we organized a lot of public reaction. We went and held a protest, which was illegal, at the front of the government, protesting against the fact that supermarkets are open and peasant markets are closed. And we demanded the reopening of these peasant markets, these territorial markets, because most of the peasants of Romania, small farmers of Romania, which feed millions of citizens of Romania, were losing their livelihood, losing their ability to sell their products very quickly in lack of alternatives. So what we did was this exactly the first thing. Then secondly, it was very important for us to indeed develop short food chain markets, something that was developing already in Romania and that we have been facilitating through our organization. So all kinds of initiatives that were pilot initiatives or smaller initiatives incipiently started to rapidly grow because of need. So food hubs or even online services, just like the one that was mentioned before, they were starting to be very operational and very, very needed in these times. And farmers, peasant farmers, found innovative ways to sell their goods because we had to. But still, the main pillar of support was that we managed to get the territorial markets opened and to keep them open all towards the pandemic. That was a huge challenge. Moreover, we started to mobilize to build solidarity and support the rights of migrant and seasonal workers. There are two social elements that are often overlooked, but Romania is a huge seasonal worker, let's say, origin for Western Europe. And while the pandemic kicked in, it was quite paradoxal that, again, countries like Germany, Spain, Italy, while there was a shutdown on flights, they started to negotiate with governments special flights for workers to be taken into horrible conditions to continue to work during the pandemic on the greenhouses, packed up in pack houses and so on. So we started to heavily challenge this situation, which was quite unfair, and to create solidarity with them and to try to find alternative models, but also to ask and to ensure safe passage for these people, because many were going to these places because they had to, because they needed their livelihood and they were depending on this migrant work, for instance, or seasonal work. Also, very important it was that indeed to not have and to continuously kick down double standards in Romania, because they were indeed not just with supermarkets, but they were double standards for processing units, and they were anything was discretionary the government was approving, while ultimately others were shut down. It was a lot of untransparency suddenly on the food chain and the market. Now, on a European level, we started to really react as the European Coordination Via Campesina on these kind of like double standards also, and the problem of free trade, which was collapsing. So we really wanted to highlight the issues of free trade and how in these times, especially small farmers and peasant farmers are providing stability, and that we are ready to face this pandemic and to face the food shortage and to provide food for the European regions. So we were demanding politically action on this, and also we were demanding that although we are in the pandemic, certain gains for the benefit of the food system are not discarded, like it was the farm to fork strategy, which was a huge gain. And suddenly all the big farmers started to kick back and say, well, we don't need these new innovations now on agroecology, or we don't need to redefine our food system right now because we are in an emergency. So let's just keep business as usual. So this is something that we were heavily fighting back from on a European level. We needed to maintain fair wages for farmers during the pandemic, and we needed to demand this. And we also needed to kick down discrimination against seasonal workers and migrant workers, which was already high, and it became even higher. So one last thing I want to say that what we have been doing, something that is often overlooked, and I want to bring, we are a political organization, and we defend the rights of our peasants, and we give voice to peasant farmers in Romania. And what we see that suddenly during the COVID pandemic, there was a huge rise of the populist right-wing agenda, starting to hijack discourse on food sovereignty, starting to hijack discourse on localization of food, creating from food a political nationalist agenda rather than a solidarity agenda. Also, there was a lot of misinformation in the rural area, and this we found and challenged in our own organizations. We started to really have to have a reaction towards misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories around the COVID, the foreigners that are invading, and the globalists and the elite and Bill Gates and everything. So there are a lot of conspiracies that we had to kick down, and it kept us busy just to inform peasant farmers to not fall in the trap of this misinformation. So this is something that I wanted to bring up because I think it's important to mention both the political dimensions and the erosion of our society, political society during the COVID pandemic. So thank you. I think that's for the first question. Sorry if I spoke a lot.
Thank you very much, Attila. Yeah, and also Ceyhan, I would like to give the word to you and also ask you to please give us a little bit of insight on your main activities, the main activities of your organization during the pandemic.
Hello, and thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this amazing conference, actually. Yeah, you all...
Unmuted.
Yeah, now it's okay. You already presented some facts and some description of TADIA. So it's a actually small local collective, which consists of about 16 units. Many of them families based in a rural area of Ankara, in the village of Ankara. So we define ourselves as a grassroots collective. We don't have any status as to official cooperative or anything, but we are self-organizing but principled, democratic, I would say, collective that consists of mainly producer families and a group of people from the city who describe themselves as the supporters of Tadia, indeed. Yeah, we are here for more than 10 years, but well, dealing with, of course, all aspects of agroecology in the food system. We're trying to come up with an example of a local agroecological initiative, both in terms of production methods and in terms of procurement, in terms of direct sales. And we do all our activities within the framework of small-scale farming and exemptions that are somehow defined within the legislation for such small-scale production. Somehow ill-defined, but still, I mean, we can live in this legislative environment by not to be forced as into a official cooperative or any company, etc. So what we want to do actually is to diversify production and also adopt resilient methods that are low input, low external inputs, and that respect the environment actually. So we use a mixture of traditional methods and also permaculture methods and a mixture of regenerative methods. So whatever works actually, but of course not allowing, for instance, any systemic chemicals, etc. But we don't use any organic official certification. So it's kind of a local system, local guarantee system, I would say, a participatory guarantee system where we praise and we practice transparency and also opening all our areas of production and all our meetings even to our supporters so that there is this self-regulating system. And when it was the times of crisis actually, or panic, when the pandemic started, we actually wanted to use this as an opportunity in the sense that actually we already had some projects going on with the involvement of more urban people, including me, although I should be considered both urban and rural because we also lived there and produced. But we had such projects that aim to strengthen resilience and community involvement. And one of these projects is still ongoing now. But when the pandemic was there, we had some ongoing projects also. And we got permissions to travel actually to the village, sometimes with large groups, so that we continued on capacity building, trainings, community support, visibility of Tadia, the infrastructure for direct sales, etc. So we thought that actually this is also an opportunity for strengthening our network and strengthening our infrastructure and also community commitment indeed. So we had a lot of meetings. We met to define our common rules and criteria, etc. And critically, we started home deliveries with a small van actually. Again, one of our villagers said he would be able to help on this. And then we also got the permissions again in terms of distributing these products to our supporters, to the buyers. And then actually, this was an opportunity to grow for Tadia. And this also was facilitated by an increase in productive labor during the pandemic. So I'm very much aware that this is a very local case. This is a very specific case. So I'm not trying to generalize to the general situation in Turkey. But in this case, actually, many people from the village either chose to stay in the village or some of them just came back, returned to the village for production. And they started, for instance, growing vegetables and other products, dairy products, etc. So there was also an increase in the number of producers and in the amount of the products that they produced actually. So from about 6 producer families in the beginning of the pandemic, we now arrived at a scale of 16 families now, or 16 units. So there was also a growth in the number of producers who are part of the collective. And also Tadia buyers or the supporters also preferred home deliveries. This system, that small system of home delivery that we started because of hygienic reasons, etc., at least for some time, when there was this stress and even small-scale panic about the supermarket-based mass distribution system. So these were the positive sides as in terms of the local aspects. So in general, we use this pandemic as an opportunity for capacity building and to extend both the collective itself and its network actually of buyers and supporters. So we had more access to Ankara people, a very considerable increase in production. But this was due to our intentional efforts actually as producers, as village people, and also urban people. But on the negative side, of course, we had to stop, for instance, our efforts for a farmers market in Ankara. So we really had a lot of meetings before the pandemic period, and we met with municipalities in order to get a farmer market at a central place in the weekend in Ankara. So we had to stop all these efforts, and now we lost some 3 years mainly in these efforts of achieving a farmers market in a central place in Ankara. So this was the main negative side from the perspective of our local efforts. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Ceyhan, for sharing this with us. Yeah, so to move on to the second question then, as we all know, of course, the pandemic has gone through many different stages, right? It wasn't like a continuous situation, but it unfolded very differently throughout time and also throughout space, of course. And we also had different phases of more and less restrictions and food emergency situations. And my second question then would be, so for your organization or in your specific context that you've been working in, what were the most difficult time periods for you in your situation? And can you tell us a little bit about that situation? What made it so specifically difficult, and how did you engage with these difficulties? And I would like to give this question first again to Serenity from Australia.
Thank you. I might respond briefly to this and then maybe just say a couple of other things that have occurred to me in response to the other speakers. So the most challenging part was right at the start for us because of that huge leap in use and new enterprises popping up to kind of respond to. But then what happened towards the end when restrictions were lifted, consumers forgot about local food again and went back to normal. And a lot of the enterprises that we work with had expanded, staff and maybe taken out a different lease on a building because all their numbers were going up. And then it dropped away. And this happened across the whole sector. And really, and it happened as sort of from our organization as well, because we had to ramp up. We had like 6 hours of customer service to support all the enterprises, in Australia before the pandemic. And then we had to go, we like tripled that. So we would have people to support the growth. But yes, the hardest thing is then when people organized around that growth and then it dropped away. I would just say, maybe later we can talk about this, but right now is the hardest because that's dropped away, but then we've got all these other challenges that are converging, and I'm sure this is what's happening everywhere with food prices increasing. We've got floods in Australia at the moment with a fifth of crops underwater. So we've got these converging stresses. We're getting hit. again, and the sector is so strapped or kind of, you know, weak. Because consumers, we've not got that, you know, a lot of the enterprises that we work with kind of rely on kind of middle income consumers to be paying the true cost of the food, and then enterprises figure out other ways that they can increase access to lower income people, and we're having this high income kind of bracket or middle income bracket dropping away and drop in food, in sort of organic and local food sales, and the interest from consumers drop away, which is really very concerning. I would just say, just in response to others' comments, we also had the issue with farmers market having to come together as a sector and advocate very strongly, very quickly for the government to open up farmers markets again. So that wasn't a given. We had to kind of work to make that kind of happen over those first couple of months, and then we had both farmers markets on ground and the online sector both have a surge at the start of the sector, and yeah, maybe the other two themes that we saw underlying in terms of the kind of food system was we also had that exposure of the sort of the underbelly of the industrial food system relying on backpackers and migrant workers and underpaid workers. And we saw the industrial system, the mainstream system, come together politically to get special consideration for being able to continue to use those kind of underpaid workers. So anyway, that was interesting. And we also saw towards the end of, or sort of the kind of middle, we saw a lot of people from the cities want to move out to rural land. And this has had a backlash in terms of raising the cost of rural land, which reduces the access for farmers, because there's all these city people who wanted to move out of the city because of their experience of being locked down. So that was another interesting thing that we saw here.
Thank you, Serenity. And yeah, Attila, would you also like to respond to this question? Like how did you move through the different phases, and which were the most difficult time periods for you and your organization?
Yeah, thank you. Well, with the risk of sometimes repeating myself, I will not mention again the closing of the territorial markets and the sudden need of organization and protesting and breathing each other's COVID in so that we can open our markets. But just wanted to rather refer here that we should not forget that for a large period of time, there was a general and chronic state of emergency. And the declared state of emergency of all the countries, and I can talk about my country, Romania, made the fact that general decisions and policy making became very unilateral. And most of the country was based on presidential decrees and governmental ordinances, rather than the democratic decision making around policy making. And most importantly, it was not just for the pandemic. So anything related to pandemic, but everything related to all sides of policy making, which were affecting the millions, millions of lives. So I just want to give, based on this announcement, an example. We in Romania, we are still 4 million peasant farmers, and EU has more than 10 million peasant small-scale farmers, and most of them are small-scale animal breeders. And when the first ordinances came down that they are closing the markets, quickly the ministry also started to push for other laws that were hard and challenged by small farmers, and to push them through the pipeline. One of them being putting a heavy regulation on the rearing of pigs, due to the other pandemic, which is the flu, the pig flu. So everything was started to put in the pipeline, and suddenly we realized that we need a bunch of accreditations and a bunch of, we need to slay off our pigs, otherwise the ministry comes and slay off our pigs. So this was a very heavy time while our markets were closed and we could not sell our vegetables and our fruits, and while our suddenly the ordinances came through that we need to also kill off our animals. We were just being shackled to the ground as farmers. So that meant a lot. That was the worst period of our time in recent history due to the pandemic, but it came because of the erosion of democracy. So that was basically one of the big things. And then after that, something more acute came, the fact that a lot of the huge traders and resellers started to gain a lot of monopoly, especially when it comes to small-scale grain producers, which had to make to survive COVID, they had to make future contracts on grains, which were very detrimental for them. So the grain market started to really collapse, and the traders started to really hoard on grains, buying very cheap from, even cheaper than normal, from producers, and selling on international markets very expensive, because they said, well, the trade routes are blocked due to about that pandemic, and Romania is also a huge trader. So definitely another discreditation of the small farmer came through this kind of very preferential contract that were towards the traders. Now, of course, on a European level, I will finish this. Another pinnacle point of the struggle was indeed to ensure the safety of migrant and seasonal workers. This was critical because in Andalusia, for instance, there were migrant workers dying in horrible conditions, and pandemic hotspots spreading because it was a very dualistic approach of the local government towards health standards, which were not applying towards these migrant farmers. So definitely this was a very gruesome pinnacle point also of the COVID, something that us as European farmers had to struggle and had to push to be resolved and to assure the safety of these fellow workers. So I think I'm going to stop this with the question, and yeah, thank you. It was a good one.
Thank you, Attila. And yeah, Seyhan, do you agree with that as well? Or I mean, I'm not sure, but I imagine that also in your case, the pandemic didn't unfold in the same way throughout the entire time period. Can you tell us a little bit more maybe about how you experienced that and what the most difficult times were in your situation?
And again, remembering that I'm really talking about a case study, not easily generalizable. The most difficult times, but still, this is general, of course, were the initial times where we didn't have any travel permission for some months, so that we could not go to the village, and the village people could not really come to Ankara. And then this was a period of course, chaos in general. And then, well, as I mentioned, there was this time where the demand to agroecological food, demand from small-scale farmers, our networks of community support agriculture and similar initiatives in Turkey, we were in contact with all of them, of course, and we've seen that actually the demand, the increase, there was a very huge increase in demand for some periods, and us, as well as other initiatives, comparable initiatives, could not really procure all of that. So this was positive, of course, but then many people, again, as reported earlier, dropped actually, because first of all, the big retail sector also adapted very fast to this situation. And then people could access to food, even though it's industrial food, actually, with online orders and home deliveries. And after this unfortunately, very fast adaptation of the industrial system, actually, the initial increase was not there anymore. So it dropped to lower levels, but still in comparison with before the pandemic, there was still an increase actually. But in general, I could say that people started to forget about the true cost and the true risks of industrial food system. Other than that, we also had some other difficulties, but not that much related with how the pandemic unfolded actually. I mean, like some some expected difficulties with this sudden growth in Tadia as cooperatives from about six families to about 16 families actually. So there were lots of personal conflicts, social conflicts that we had to deal with, and this was difficult, of course, but this is inevitable. I mean, if you really want to achieve some progress, then conflict is always waiting there, and we cannot really turn our face in other directions. So we have to face with this. But in the end, actually, these conflicts were resolved somehow, and Tadia got stronger. And we also had a struggle against the mining projects in that period, a bit more recent, but still within this pandemic period actually. And we were again successful legally actually. We had a case, and then we were able to stop, at least at this stage, a mining project which was very close to our production areas in the village. While in the end, another effect actually, a bit again indirect, but this is related to the recent increase or the ongoing increase actually in food prices in all over the world, but especially in Turkey. We can observe that food inflation is relatively heavy in Turkey actually, because of these, rising prices in agricultural inputs and other operations, especially in the industrial system. So the effect, so this is also linked to the pandemic somehow, but not, of course, to the pandemic of the political crisis, Ukrainian case, etc., many other effects. But we could keep our prices not that high as compared to the industrial system. So this was also nice in showing that actually our efforts really work, because there's a huge inflation in food prices, but there is relatively little increase in our prices as Tadia. And this is expected because this is a low input system. This is more based on local resources, the agroecological methods, and it really shows somehow that we have more resilience against external shocks. And now people see and also comment, and they say that actually the prices of Tadia, this agroecological food, is really very close actually now to that of the supermarkets. And we really want to make this some kind of a proof, write this down in terms of some reports to show that actually this is a proof to show that actually agroecological methods create more resilience, not in terms of just nature, but also in terms of economy. So I think these are the things that come to my mind. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah. We have two more questions left, and I'm not sure if Berta is still able to join us. We're still hoping that she might join. So moving to our third question now, and I'd like to ask you maybe to respond a little bit more briefly to those two last questions. The first one would be that at least if we read some academic literature, one of the main ideas about the pandemic is that it hasn't only shown us a lot of issues that happened during the pandemic, of course, but also really exposed frauds and the failures of our existing food system, right? So my question here would be, do you agree with this observation? And from your perspective, what were the most important already existing food issues that the pandemic then exacerbated? And I would like to go in the reverse order this time and just start with you again, Ceyhan, and ask you to please maybe share your opinion on this question with us.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I already tried to mention some aspects related to a potential answer to this question. Yeah, actually, but it was very obvious throughout Turkey, and also as far as I could see globally, that the pandemic really exposed the weaknesses, risks, and dangers even of this, wide scale and industrial food system. And for many people like us who have been dealing with this was not news at all, but this was new for many people who didn't have any kind of in-depth understanding of the effects of the food system. So I agree that was very much visible, and many people started to talk about food, etc. But as I told you, I mean, it was easily forgotten, or many people didn't really get, including politicians, didn't really want to get to the root causes, actually. And of course, I mean, in the actors in the industrial food system didn't really change their minds. I mean, it's not, they didn't really say in general, okay, this system does not really work well, so let's support local food systems, kind of. This didn't happen in general. And as I told you, we saw that actually after this, these patch kind of actions of the industrial food system in terms of home deliveries, etc. So people started to forget about this. Now in Turkey, actually, many people again are voicing more than before that we should do something about food. But I don't think that this something is really well qualified. I mean, it's not well understood. But relatively, I think now more people understand about the prospects, negative prospects that the industrial food system has for us. So what I mean is that actually that there was a change in the minds, and that's ongoing. But in terms of legislation and in terms of practical applications, we unfortunately still cannot see any substantial efforts from the side of the government or local authorities in supporting local food systems.
Yeah, Attila, what is your perspective on this question?
Very
critical. Do you agree that it's exacerbating or that it's exposing to some degree what the underlying issues are anyway already?
Of course, I very much, and we very much agree. And the corporate hijacking of our food systems were kept with their pants down, basically very empty-handed and naked, to show the whole world that this system is dysfunctional. And I would just like to not have this critical statement for vain, but just would like to bring our attention to the financialization of land, for instance, and how in the pandemic times, what happened, and we documenting, for instance, in Romania, land grabbing in the last at least 10 years. And what happened during the pandemic is that because of the decision-making process and the transparency process eroded, there was a lot of concentration and grabbing of land during the pandemic, which further destroys local food systems and puts out peasants from their regions, basically transforming them into migrant and seasonal workers in other countries. This was one thing that we saw like really as an excess. Then, of course, there are these examples of workers' rights, for instance, in slaughterhouses, how it was in Germany. And what happened during the pandemic is that so these workers have been working in very indecent and very hard labor conditions already in these slaughterhouses in Germany. For instance, workers from the Romania, from Ukraine, from Bulgaria. But during the pandemic, they started to die because of the sickness, because of the COVID, and because it's not enough that we were working under harder conditions, it was even harder and not respecting their workers' rights. And this is well documented. It's just showing how the food system is broken, especially during the pandemic, how it's even more broken. Then, of course, on a policy level, as I was mentioning, indeed, that and I very much agree with Ceyhan that much of the discussions were not about transforming our food systems. This was something that was heavily demanded by the European coordination Via Campesina, that now is the chance to bet more on agroecology. Now is the chance to give more power back to people as consumers and as producers to define their own food system, as food sovereignty says. And this was the chance that was not taken by the European decision makers, and instead just bringing fixes to patch up, exactly, very good word, to patch up the situation. And that was meaning that indeed a lot of lobby went against the farm to fork strategy and its transformative elements. A lot of criticism went against the biodiversity strategy and how can we halt biodiversity, while on the ground organizations like Eco Ruralis were providing seeds to everybody who wants to grow food, because there was a need for food autonomy and diversity of food. So there was a general turning away from agroecology and during these times. And by trying to patch things up, we are now finding ourselves also in multiple crises because of the war in Ukraine, because of the climatic crisis. And now we are seeing that these fixes don't work. We still need to fundamentally change our food system. Now, just to mention some other elements, what we observe is also the digitalization agenda of the EU during the COVID. There was enormous data generated from the farmers back during the COVID situation, and farmers had to turn into digital. And we very much agree with the digital, that how Serenity does it, and we do it also. But the digital agenda of the EU is not this nice open source agenda, but it's a very data mining agenda. It's very eroding agenda on digitalization that's very exclusive, and it became even more exclusive during the pandemic. So large farmers, big farmers with a lot of money had even more money through the cap to invest into digital tractors, $1 million tractors. So that was indeed a very big, just shows another weakness of our food system. And finally, we just showed on a general level how important are small farmers and medium farmers in resilience. So while everything was against us as a tide, we were showing from the ground by being on the markets, even when it was illegal, by providing food, even when we were cut down almost all funding for it, while providing solidarity, we showed that small farmers and medium-scale farmers and local farmers are producing food to feed our territories. So that was very important at the moment when long food chains just broke, and to what some extent, because of COVID, and after that, the multiple crises remained broken. So definitely something to be taken into consideration, and hopefully there will be some thinking, food for thought for policymakers, and we need to make sure that they have.
Serenity also already hinted at a few major issues, I guess, in the Australian food system. But yeah, I'd love to hear from your perspective as well. Do you agree
Yes.
with this thesis? Yeah,
I absolutely agree. And I think I'll be quite short. I'll just echo the other speakers. I mean, the main thing is exposing the fragility of the centralised system. We had processing shut down in whole regional cities. We had, because of the centralisation of the supermarkets, that, you know, there was no food because of the labour shortages that happened. Like, it just exposed fragility all over the place. I talked before, about this unjust treatment of the workforce that's holding up this whole industrial system. It exposed the fragility of low-income people, the most exposed to the fragility of the system. And I would also echo we also had this situation here where the government responded, but in ways where it's not understanding the deep systemic issues, and then ends up causing more problems. So we had a situation where our provincial government launched an online platform to support local farmers in competition to us, and in a way that was ridiculous, because it was basically saying they would subsidise the movement of, you know, one package of food from way over here into the city. So it was basically supporting a thing so it could put out a media release saying it was supporting farmers, but it was actually undercutting, you know, people actually working for systems change and causing more problems than it created. So I would say that this shallow understanding, both at the government level, but also the majority of eaters, is deeply problematic because we didn't get that shift by seeing these vulnerabilities exposed. I would echo, we haven't had the systemic shift yet.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing that as well. And now I see that Gilberta, she has been able to join us. Are you there and can you hear us? Silent. Okay. Yes, thank you. Okay, all right. So okay, but she is there and you're communicating with her? Oh, no, she just disappeared again. Such a shame. All right, okay, so we have one last question left theoretically, but I do also recognize that we have an audience here which has been very patiently listening, and maybe before I come to that last question, we can still integrate that and maybe at a later point in time, depending on how we go. But I would like to open up the room first and give our audience here as well the possibility to ask some questions or give some comments and to make this hybrid format a little bit more interactive. So who from the audience maybe would like to jump in and ask our speakers some questions or maybe share some of their own experience? Who goes first? Or if there's no need and you'd like to continue listening to our panelists, of course, that is also an option. Hilda, yeah.
Maybe I can try.
Yeah, can you hear her? Yeah.
Can you hear me in the panel? Thank you very much, all of you, for your sharing your stories and reflections on the situation. And I do think there's some common knowledge that you bring out in the shared stories. What I'm wondering, and in particular to the letter comments on the EU policy and responses and kind of moving back to back to the old pathways again in the current situations, focusing on industrial agriculture and maybe forgetting and also possibly say optimistic policies in the EU and the food to farm strategy. I don't want to go into that, but I'm just thinking. I want to ask on reflections on what is the capacity, because I guess one of the arguments is thrown back if we're going to focus more on alternative food networks. What's the capacity of actually feeding the population, feeding the communities? So this is not a critical, but it's more on what are your reflections meeting these policies and arguments?
Okay, who would like to respond to that question?
Well, I can
Attila?
start.
Yes.
I
Go ahead.
criticize a lot European policy, so I mean I can give it a wing. If I understand correctly, maybe correct me, but small farmers, we have one very interesting trait. First, we feed ourselves, and then we feed also others. But let's not forget the fact that we are autonomous in feeding ourselves. While I'm mentioning that we are, in our case in Romania, at least 4 million farmers, which to a great degree we feed ourselves, and we feed millions of other people. If we are let and are not impeded by these kind of measures that were taken very discriminatively, then we are already feeding our populations and we are already feeding Europe. And this is, we can see this, and we can do even more if supported, not discredited in these times. So that's meaning also in the CAP. The CAP is a driver force of closing down farms in Europe. The CAP until now is can be directly attributed as a failure to not grow the number of farms in Europe, what is mostly needed, but to decrease the number of farms and to concentrate more lands. So if we reverse the CAP, we put already so much support on the hand of those like peasant farmers and small farmers and medium farmers of Europe, which are the backbone of European farming still, in order to produce more, to produce healthy, even more healthier, and to produce to supply sufficiency to people. But of course, so we are there, we are ready. That was our first reaction to the European policies and the policy making. Is our first reaction as Via Campesina Europe was, we are here, we are ready, we are supplying, let us do more. From there on, it got complicated. So yeah, that's my maybe my basic answer to that.
Rehan or Serenity, would you also like to comment on this question, or Shehan?
Well, I can say a few words. Well, me and many of our friends actually are already convinced, easily convinced in the face of data that agroecological methods and human-scale agriculture and human-scale local food webs are more than enough to feed all the population. It's just a matter of political will, actually. If the oppressing forces are removed, actually, people know how to achieve this. I mean, this we don't only know from our own experience and our own rationality, but from also many studies that have been conducted and many reports. Like, for instance, I have in mind this booklet of ETC group, for instance, Who Will Feed Us? And also lots of simulations, one from IDRI, like the agroecological Europe kind of simulation. It's really clear that it's a matter of widening the scope of or having more such human scale production rather than concentrated big farms with very little impact, and even with possibilities of regeneration in terms of nature, and without really committing any labor kind of theft, I would say. So I can't find all the right words after that many hours of lectures. Sorry for that. Exploitation, let's say. It's no exploitation of labor, etc. So lots of side effects, and it's already documented that such systems can feed the world. I mean, even at the level of UN, we have official reports on that. But one of the things we want to do in our little efforts in the village, and I think it will come in a few months, maybe in 6 months or so, to make a projection actually of our methods. Like, for instance, take this village of ours. We are confident that we are going to produce good results, and take this case and then generalize it to Ankara region, which is a big region actually, in terms of available land, in terms of available workforce, and have some scenarios, alternative scenarios to show that actually local production around Ankara will be more than sufficient in really procuring enough and high quality food with very low social and environmental effects actually. So this is actually what we want to achieve. So, because I mean, this is important. I mean, although we know from general reports and our experience that small scale or human scale agroecological farming can feed the world, but we need to make business out of this. And this is one of our plans actually, to generalize and make some projections.
Thank you very much, Ceyhan. All right, so I do believe that Gilberta is actually now with us and that she can hear us. And I would just jump right into it and ask her to please also present her organization and start with the first question to give us a bit of an idea. What has she and her, what her organizations, what have they been doing during the pandemic? Oops. Not sure what happened right now. Okay. Gilberta, are you there? And can you share your experience with us? That would be fantastic. Jose, did you just shake your head? Does that mean something isn't working? Okay. Okay. Okay, otherwise we could also just do it like we don't have to do it simultaneously. We can also just have her speak in Spanish, maybe in the main room, and then one of you can translate for us. That would be maybe another option if the various channels are too complicated. Yeah. Oh, okay. Can you try again, Karen, maybe?
Maybe we should switch to Spanish.
Hola.
Hola. Hola, Gilberto.
Hola. Sí. Sí, sí. Te escucho a ti.
Then maybe we can go back to
Perfecto. Primeramente, quiero agradecer por la oportunidad que nos dan desde la Asociación de Mujeres Indígenas de Santa María Xalapán, Jalapa, Amismashak, que es una organización de mujeres indígenas xincas, que actualmente estamos en la reivindicación de nuestra autoidentificación, que es un acto político también para nosotras el mantener nuestra identidad. ¿Sigo o espero unos minutos? ¿Sí que? Sí, sí, sí. Perdón. Muy bien. Desde este espacio quiero compartir con ustedes, pues, de cómo vivimos nosotras las mujeres la pandemia, ¿verdad? O mujeres durante la pandemia. Pues fue un par de años súper difíciles debido a que, pues, nuestra principal fuente de alimentación fue muy afectada, especialmente los granos básicos, que es el maíz y el frijol, quienes son estos dos alimentos básicos que nos sustentan a las comunidades indígenas. Esto debido a varios factores que fueron afectados por el alto alto índice, por ejemplo, del transporte, que se elevó mucho. También por la canasta básica, actualmente todavía estamos sufriendo esos efectos porque actualmente está en 3,000 quetzales, cuando en las comunidades pues no llegamos ni siquiera a los 1,500, ¿verdad? De ganar o tener un sueldo mensual en esta cantidad. Entonces, otro factor que afectó muchísimo fueron a los productores y a las productoras de hortalizas, debido a que con los estados de excepción que se obtuvo por parte del gobierno, pues muchas personas, muchos agricultores y agricultoras no lograron sacar su producto hacia los mercados, debido a que los mercados pues fueron cerrados por muchísimo tiempo. Y pues hubo muy limitada la compra y venta de estos productos, lo cual pues se perdió en su mayoría. El otro factor en que nos afectó la alimentación ha sido pues a través del alto también consumo, por ejemplo, de los insumos para cultivar. Entonces, como mujeres, pues intentamos como regresar nuevamente al trabajo comunitario que ya se hacía desde antes por nuestras abuelas. Por ejemplo, desde el uso de las plantas medicinales, porque tampoco las vacunas no llegaron a las comunidades, fuimos muy pocas personas quienes obtuvimos estas vacunas para contrarrestar los efectos del COVID-19. Entonces, ¿cómo nos estuvimos curando para la prevención del COVID en las comunidades? Fue a través del uso de las plantas medicinales. Entonces, contamos con un grupo de las socias de Abismashak, quienes ellas están trabajando toda la parte de la transformación de plantas. Ellas hacen tinturas relajantes, ellas hacen también tinturas para limpiar sangre, y se dieron en la tarea de investigar qué plantas podrían contrarrestar los efectos del COVID-19 y en té, ¿verdad? Entonces fueron como ellas estuvieron en esta investigación y nos estuvimos pues tomando los tés, haciendo baños para que no nos fuera a afectar. Entonces vimos como que fue una oportunidad también en donde pudimos como obtener esa relación cercana con la tierra, porque también tuvimos la oportunidad de cultivar nuestro propio alimento, lo cual ya no lo hacíamos, ¿verdad? Porque pues hay en la comunidad hay personas quienes se dedican solo al cultivo de hortalizas, y en nuestra región las mujeres no poseemos tierras, son nuestros papás, ¿verdad? Los esposos, los hermanos quienes son poseedores de las tierras, pero las mujeres no. Entonces logramos como coordinar de las comunidades, donde nos lograron proporcionar un pedazo de tierra para que como grupo, como comunidad, lográramos obtener o cultivar nuestros huertos de hortalizas. Entonces es así como con los apoyos que hemos obtenido por parte de las alianzas de Fundebase, quienes nos han proporcionado también las semillas para el cultivo, también ya en pilones, y esto hizo un poco menos, digamos, difícil poder pasar ese tiempo de la pandemia con las mujeres. También ha sido como un vínculo lo vimos y pudimos observar que las mujeres ahí pues se pudieron conectar con la tierra. También fue un momento de sanación debido a que todo lo que estaba pasando alrededor de los encierros, que no podíamos salir ni organizarnos, estábamos cayendo en depresión. Entonces fue una muy buena oportunidad el poder ir a nuestro huerto, convivir ahí con las otras compañeras, ¿verdad? Con las compañeras cercanas, porque sí nos afectó muchísimo a nivel psicológico. Fuimos muy afectadas, tanto el pensar las mamás que no obtenían como la alimentación necesaria para la familia. Entonces esto nos hizo a buscar otras estrategias. Entonces, hasta hoy en día seguimos con nuestros cultivos de huertos, ¿verdad? De hortalizas, también la diversificación de las plantas en las parcelas, el sistema milpa, que le denominamos aquí en las regiones o en los pueblos originarios, ¿verdad? El sistema milpa consiste en el cultivo de diversas plantas en una parcela, que es el aprovechamiento de la tierra y del alimento. Entonces podemos tener el maíz, el frijol, pero también podemos tener otras hortalizas o alimentos como el huicoy, ¿verdad? El ayote, podemos tener la juruna, que son los otros alimentos que en las comunidades consumimos. Hay una gran discriminación desde la pandemia hasta hoy en día. Hay una gran discriminación con la alimentación por el gobierno, debido a que en la canasta básica alimentaria pues no existen los alimentos que las comunidades consumimos. En la canasta básica alimentaria que tiene el gobierno, pues solo existen los productos enlatados. Nos sorprende mucho y nos da mucha indignación porque dentro de la canasta básica alimentaria incluyen las sopas instantáneas, lo cual pues sabemos que eso es nos hacen un gran daño en nuestro cuerpo, que no está dentro tampoco de nuestra dieta alimenticia como pueblos originarios, y que esto nos hace ver como que la canasta alimentaria solo la pueden obtener las personas con cierto nivel económico alto y de áreas específicas, por ejemplo, áreas urbanas, y en las áreas rurales donde estamos las comunidades, pues no existen esas alimentaciones que nosotros consumimos, ¿verdad? Entonces no hay como programas específicos para el restablecimiento de nuestra alimentación en las comunidades, y seguimos siendo afectadas. El otro año, lamentablemente, tenemos ya la perspectiva de que no vamos a tener alimentación como lo hemos tenido en estos años, que aunque estuvo la pandemia, pero sí logramos como cosechar el maíz y el frijol, pero para el otro año lamentablemente no se va a poder tener como la misma cosecha debido a los vientos y a las lluvias que han pasado actualmente en estos días en los territorios, porque todo ha encarecido, los insumos para la siembra, para la cosecha, pues ha incrementado, y la milpa ahorita está en el suelo porque el aire la ha botado. Entonces ya no se va a tener esa cosecha, y lamentablemente Santa María de Xalapán es un área donde persiste el corredor seco, que es un área muy seca, muy escasa de agua, que no tan fácil podemos obtener nuestro alimento. Entonces, no sé si sigo o dejo por acá para no cansarnos y así seguir con otra.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Gilberta. Thank you for sharing this with us. With regard to the time, unfortunately, we do need to close this off in a little while here, but I did want to give the opportunity again to the audience, maybe to ask some questions or comment. Are there any urgent questions?
I think there was a question in the chat.
Yes, there was one question in the chat, which I do believe to some extent is similar to Hilda's question. I do think maybe that has been answered to some extent. And if that's not the case, maybe, okay, so let's do one last round, maybe one quick last round in terms of maybe ending on a bit of a note of hope. And one question that we would have had as well, or maybe one observation, I guess, was that we did also see quite a bit of resilience and solidarity throughout the pandemic. And I would like for each speaker, each panelist of this roundtable, maybe if they agree with this and if they also did see some resiliency and solidarity, to maybe share one particular moment that where they experienced this with us. And Gilberta, maybe if you like to start, is that something that you've seen, and could you share a moment of resiliency that you've seen in your community? Could you share that with us, if that was the case?
Sí, prefiero que inicie a una persona más antes que yo.
Okay, sure. So then I go to Serenity again, because I'm sure she must be almost drifting away and falling asleep over there in Australia.
I am. I'm going to go back to bed.
You're still with us.
I think I mentioned earlier about how that quick thing came together with farmers coming together to be able to, so we witnessed quick self-organization at that level, and also self-organization of social enterprises coming together in Melbourne, for instance, into a collaborative to talk to the government and to organise. So I think my hope is in, our complex systems and our ability to come together quickly and self-organise. And I think the need, talking to the question in the chat, the need is very much about coordination of networks of resistance and organising. And I think one of the key focuses needs to be on land, like access to land. Is the fundamental kind of enabler of being able to feed ourselves.
Shehan, a moment of solidarity maybe, or resiliency that you've seen?
Yeah, well, in terms of resiliency, we are constantly impressed by our villagers' efforts and their results, actually, in terms of the diversity of food that they can really grow in a small village. It's incredible. I mean, from fruits to vegetables to dairy products to honey and almost everything. I mean, of course, we cannot produce bananas or tangerines, etc., a few of them, but it's really impressive to see that actually our villagers continue to grow and also offer to our supporters actually many fruits, like for instance figs and peaches and pomegranate, which are really weird in the context of Ankara, because no one would grow them in for the market actually in Ankara. So no one would do any commercial activity regarding these fruits, because they would not compete, for instance, with the large retail system. But our villagers do produce them and they sell them, and they have these lots of different products, maybe hundreds of different products, continually in their list. So this really shows that actually this kind of production is really resilient because it's really diversified, and then they are not really badly affected by climatic factors because they have lots of different items that they produce. And then if one is not going well due to some reasons, some weather reasons or others, the other kind of product, let's say cereals or vegetables, grow well. So this is constantly amazing for us to see that actually we have such diversity. And in terms of solidarity, again, in many occasions, when we have these meetings in the village, so in principle, our meetings as collective are open to everyone, actually. Even very hard issues, conflicting issues are being discussed in these meetings. And there are always lots of people from the city, from our supporters that come to the village and make part of this, setting. And they are active contributors of these meetings. And lots of important moments in mind regarding this solidarity, this concrete examples of solidarity that I see in these meetings, actually.
Thank you. And Attila, is there something, an example that comes to your mind that you'd like to share briefly?
Very briefly, yes. Yes, I can share an example. After 1 month of mobilization and protesting, my personal revelation was to see the solidarity and resilience when I walked into our local market and I see all the eyes smiling. I couldn't see the faces smiling because we were respecting all the health rules that we had to respect, and that was very normal. And we demonstrated as farmers that we are part of the society that respect rules, and our eyes were smiling because we were there legally with our markets opened. We were selling our goods. I was smiling and my eye was smiling because I see there all my friends and all the community. They could have gone to the supermarket, but we all met there. And that was a moment of solidarity, of consumer and producer solidarity. We were all happy that we can maintain our livelihood. And on a European level, I can just say another smiling opportunity, which was the fact that we managed, after a long battle, to secure the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Peasants. And that came at the right moment that, after that, it came the pandemic. And right now we are smiling because we have this time of reflection and common mobilization. And the Nyeleni Food Sovereignty Network, the Global Food Sovereignty Network, is united. We are working together and we are proposing an alternative solution to our broken food system. And the pandemic led us there in a more emergent or in a more rushed way, but now we have the instrument and we are ready to implement them on globally and on European level. So as a farmer and as a political activist in farming, I'm very happy, and it was a moment of good solidarity.
That's great to hear. Okay, Gilberta, are you still there? And is there something you can share with us as a moment, solidarity maybe, or resiliency within your community?
Sí, aquí estoy. Sí, como había comentado anteriormente, que uno de los momentos que nosotras vimos muy oportunos ha sido la elaboración o el cultivo de nuestros huertos, ¿verdad? A nivel comunitario, debido a que esto fue también, compartía las tareas de cuidado, ¿verdad? Entre las integrantes de los grupos, y hubo también intervención o hubo integración de las familias completas, porque ya no solo las mujeres estuvimos en este ámbito de cuidado del huerto, ¿verdad? Para obtener una parte de nuestra alimentación, sino también se involucraron los esposos, hermanos, también los hijos, ¿verdad? Personas que anteriormente pues no habíamos estado tan involucrados en un trabajo comunitario. Entonces creemos que de alguna manera, pues en este tiempo que estuvimos del COVID-19, pues también unió más a las familias, conocieron más el trabajo organizativo también que hacíamos y logramos compartir con otras familias porque de lo que cosechábamos nos quedábamos con una parte, pero también compartimos y seguimos compartiendo con aquellas familias que han sido más golpeadas durante la pandemia, ¿verdad? Que se quedaron sin empleo, que no poseían como otros recursos para la cosecha. Entonces, eso es uno de los momentos que yo más tengo presentes porque fue de compartir el día de la cosecha. Lamentablemente, Charlotte ya no estuvo, ¿verdad? En ese tiempo donde compartimos la cosecha y se compartió con toda la comunidad, no solamente con las que habíamos cosechado, sino que también se compartió con otras personas. Solamente.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone. Thank you, Attila. Thank you, Jehan. Thank you, Serenity, for staying up so long. You really deserve a good night's sleep now. And thank you, Gilberta. I'm very glad that eventually we did get to learn a little bit about your experience as well. And thank you to the audience. I don't know if anyone is still there with us online. And thank you to the audience here in the room as well. I'm very glad to see that you've also exchanged email addresses and so on. So please do share this with us, and please also don't hesitate to reach out. And let's continue the conversation, hopefully in the future. Goodbye to everyone, and thank you very much again. All the best.
Thank you. Have a good night. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Gracias. Saludos desde Guatemala.
Bye. Bye.